The Washington State Department of Health and Human Services confirmed to Portland TV station KGW and CPS had identified the Hart children as potential victims of alleged abuse or neglect.
God said that it may be well with thee and that thou mayest live long on the earth. And nowhere in the Bible does it say honor your parents if they're nice to you.
Sarah pleaded guilty in 2011 to a domestic assault charge in Minnesota for spanking one of her daughters over a tub, which left visible bruising on the child's stomach and back.
I mean, do you not remember what Jesus Christ said? Turn the other cheek.
But these people were wicked devils. And they just so happens to be that they're also sodomites.
And as God's people, we need to have an attitude of loving one another.
Devontae had repeatedly confided to them that he was being starved as a form of punishment. The DeKalb said the Harts refused to open the door for CPS.
And then these whiny babies, they're just like, my mom's really mean.
So you might ask, how could a horror story like this happen? Well, I'll tell you how it happens. It happens because there's an infiltration and infestation of the sodomites in the foster and adoption system. Yep, that's right. It hasn't been that long since they've even been able to adopt children. They used to have to do it incognito, and now it's just out and open. And the fact that all these homos are out of the closet has just made everything just in our face so much more. And they've infiltrated every single piece of society that we live in. Every single facet of government and schooling and all these other things. And even the foster and adoption system. These two ladies were white ladies, okay? All black children. And they were using them with their Facebook and just making it look like they had this perfect little family. And some of their friends that they watch these people pretend, people can pretend to be something else on Facebook. I don't know if you knew that or not, but they do. They said as soon as the pictures would stop, the kids would just go into this look like they're just totally miserable. That kid went over to the DeKalb's house several times. The daughter jumped out of the second-story window to try to go over there and ask him for protection.
And here's why it really pisses me off, because I know people, in fact, I'm thinking of an individual right now that I know extremely well, and they've actually lived in an actual abusive home.
I would describe my family as anything but happy. More often than not, my mom was extremely, extremely angry. Like, throughout my whole childhood, I think, she is somebody that you would just describe as just an angry, stressed out person. She was never... There obviously were times when she'd be happy or chipper, in a good mood, or having fun with her kids, or having fun with family, or seeming to be enjoying being a parent. But for the most part, she, on a daily basis, very much did not enjoy being a parent, did not enjoy what she did. And I remember the phrase she said all throughout my childhood was always like, she would just talk about how she wishes she could just leave. She's like, man, I should just leave. I'd be so much happier if I just left, never saw any of you guys again. And then with somebody like that, it's like, if you are constantly screaming and yelling, it's like, hey, everybody has bad days sometimes, but every single day, day in, day out, she's screaming, she's angry, she's stressed, she's upset, she's way more negative interaction than her, for every positive interaction she would have with her kids, 10 negative interactions. So then it's like, well, are you really the person to create a blog to be like, hey, here's how you parent, here's how you have a happy family, when you clearly don't enjoy being a parent? And me and my siblings, we always laughed at that, even as kids. Like, what does she mean when she puts this stuff out and talks about how happy and wonderful it is? She doesn't like this shit. She clearly doesn't like us that much. She clearly doesn't like parenting outside in the cold, which is very wrong, obviously. More times than I can count, she locked her kids outside in Phoenix in 115, 120 degree heat for hours on end. So it was just like, it wasn't necessarily like a punishment, but it was just like, I don't want to deal with you right now. And like, kids would be like, hey, we're really hot out here. And it'd be, yeah, 120 degrees. She might lie and say, oh, well, they had a pool they could go swimming in. The pool yard and the backyard were two separate yards, out different yards. And she would lock us in the backyard with no access to the pool. And she would lock us in the front yard with no access to the pool. Very often. Again, ask my siblings. We were locked out there for hours on end with no water, with no food. If you knocked on the door and were asked for that stuff, you'd most likely get the shit beaten out of you, because the whole reason she was doing it was just to get rid of us because she was annoyed by us. There is a Bible verse that says, if a man does not work, neither should he eat, which is basically saying that if you're not working, you're not making money to earn food, then tough shit, you can't eat. I think that's a pretty reasonable thing, right? I understand why that might be controversial, but at the same time, I think that's reasonable if, of course, you are somebody that is able to work. If you're able to work and you choose to work, that's survival of the fittest. But my mom would take that to be with her little kids, of like not allowing kids to eat. I missed a lot of meals. That was a really common punishment for us. She would always quote that verse. It says, if a man in 17th century English, in the way the Bible is written, when it talks about a man, it's referring to an adult. It's not referring to children. It's not referring to little kids. And she very often would use withholding food as a punishment, which is illegal by Arizona State Child.
I mean, if you heard their story, like, they actually have not trauma, like, well, if not everybody would agree that what I went through is trauma. No, if you heard this, everyone would agree. That's trauma. That's traumatic. Wow, I can't believe you grew up in that home.